Hello, welcome to part 1 of the Program 5 Workflow Help. You've noticed I've already made a project, Nelson P5, and I've created a driver with my information and comments. I've used some pound includes, including this new one, SStream, which is for string stream, and I've created my int main. I've also created functions.h, which I haven't done anything with yet, and my functions.cpp, which are also waiting for me. So let's get started on coding. When we look at the logic that we came up with in the test cases, let's follow that and write our program. So what it says here is we're going to declare variables and then call some functions. So let's declare variables. Okay, the first variables I'm going to declare are int number. That's for the number that might be chosen, and I'm going to initialize it. Also, I'm going to declare a spin number and initialize it. I'm going to declare low for the low part of my range and high for the high part of my range. And just initialize them to some values. Okay. I'm going to create a bool called bodd, and I'm going to state it's true, so my default choice is true. And then I need some doubles. Money, winnings, total winnings. Total winnings are, the winnings are how much is won during one play of roulette, and total winnings are the winnings that are won or lost while someone's sitting there playing several times. Okay, and now I need some strings. Go again, which is one of my usuals. I'm going to initialize it to yes. Okay, then I'm going to have a result string, which I'm going to initialize to blank. I have a total string, which I'm also going to initialize to blank, and that's for the string, well, that's not blank. And I forgot an equal sign over here. Okay, which is the result string is a string describing one spin of the roulette wheel, and total string is all the spins that a user has. And then finally, I'm going to I need a variable for file name, because as we noticed, I believe in the spec, we are going to be writing a file this time. So we need a file name. If we need any more, we can always declare them. Now I want you to notice that I'm being very careful to initialize these variables. It's important to do that. We don't want any to be in an uninitialized state, because we know what C++ puts in there. And also we're going to be passing some variables by reference and pointers. And in order to do that, they need to be initialized first, or you will get a compile error. So the first thing we're going to do is call write header. Okay, and we haven't written that yet, so let's go over to our functions.h. Well, okay, here is our write header method, but what do we need? First, we need our include guards. And I have a typo in my include guards, which doesn't get me very far. And I go ahead and copy and paste my macro for functions.h. Now the name of the file is function, and I forgot to write the S and I called it function. That's going to work fine. I'm going to put S in just because it makes more sense to me, but as long as this is a unique identifier, you're okay. And I'm going to end it with the pound end if so I don't end up with a squiggly for the rest of my coding. So let's go ahead and go over to functions.cpp and write void header and write that. The first thing we need to remember to do is to include functions.h. And since we've written it already, the C++ will give us IntelliSense for it. And what am I going to do here? I'm just going to cout. You know what? I'm just going to do it this way. Cout my name, etc. Okay? So you know what goes into the header. Now, look, I have squiggles for cout. Why is that? Because I don't have an IO stream in here. So I'm going to pound include IO stream and using namespace standard. Now I will tell you, if you only had functions.h, then you don't need using namespace standard. You need that for when you are using a library, a standard C++ library. So okay, we've called write header. The next instructions are to call show instructions. Okay, one more function to write. Let's go over here to functions.h. And again, that's a void return on show functions. We're just going to cout some instructions, and this is going to be the instructions on how to play the game. So this is going to be how to play roulette, or our brand of roulette. Okay, so obviously that there will be more in there than what I've put. If you just want to include the instructions from the spec, that will work just fine. Okay, our test case said the next thing to do is to ask for a seed for the random number generator. Okay, so we did not create a variable for seed. So I think I'm going to add one. Int seed equals 0. And now I'm going to, I'm going to call ask for seed. And let's see what that function looks like. Some of these functions are very straightforward. We're going to return an int in ask for seed because we're going to ask the user for a seed and return it so we can use it. So we're going to int seed ask for seed, and then we're going to return seed. And I'm going to give this an initial value. Okay, so we're going to ask for seed. Don't forget your C and dot ignore here. Okay, so now we have the seed, and let's take a moment to seed our random number generator. Our random number generator lives in the standard namespace, and so the function we use is srand to seed it with. You can review the part about random number generation. It's on page 150 and right around there in the book. Okay, so we're going to seed it with seed. How clever, right? Okay, moving on, our next job is to open a do while loop. And we know this is going to be while go again is yes. Because I believe, yes, that's where I said it. Okay. So now we're in the loop. That's for every time the user wants to bet on a spin of the roulette wheel. Okay, so our first instruction or our first method inside the loop is going to be show the money, which gives us the amount of our bet. So that's money. Okay, another simple function that we're going to use. There's nothing wrong with simple functions, I assure you, because when we get to the more complicated ones, you'll be looking wistfully at the simple ones. So show the money, int money. Okay, ask for the amount of the bet and return money. These all have the same pattern. Ask for information and return it. This is what we did in program 4, asking for temperature and wind speed. The next is going to be select a bet, and that is going to be, I need another variable, and that's going to be selection. And I'm going to initialize that to 1. So selection equals select a bet. Okay, so let's look at select a bet. That's going to return an int. Now here we are going to int bet type equals 1, and now we are going to display a menu for the user to select a bet type, number, odd, even, or dozens. And then we're going to return bet type. Again, the same pattern. We're just going to, instead of asking for one thing, we're going to ask them to choose between 3 choices. Okay, so now we know what type of bet it is, and we have the opportunity to call make a bet, which is an overloaded function. And make a bet will be called depending on selection. So what does that look like? You can either use a set of if-elses, or you can use a switch statement. And I think by now I know that you know that I'm fond of switch statements. Okay, so case 1 is bet on a number. And so we're going to call make a bet. And if we look at the spec, we didn't go into a lot of detail on this in the test cases. It says we need to ask the relevant questions. If the bet is a number, ask for the number. And also it says that make a bet, where is this? All three have arguments so that are references, so the arguments can be returned to main. So that's not really returned, but we are going to pass number to this function. And when we declare number over here in main, it is it's set into memory, and it has a memory address and a place to put values. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to pass the memory address to make a bet. So let's see what that looks like. Okay, so number is an int, and we're going to pass by reference. And in order to remind ourselves we're passing by reference, we're just going to put a little r here. It's not a necessity. Oops, this is the prototype. Sorry, I got carried away. It's not a necessity. This is for user remembering. Whenever you see a variable then that has an r in front of it, you know it's a reference. And later on when we do a pointer, we're going to use a p. So let's see how that's going to work. Let me make this a little bigger there. Sorry about that. Okay, so now we need to ask the user for the number that they want to bet on. And if you remember, in a function, this right here is declaring a variable that has scope within these braces. So this is the variable we're going to use. If this is the address of operator, so what we have here is the address of our number. And if that's the address of our number, then we can use our number as our value. So we're going to ask for the number to bet upon, I guess. Okay, and then we're going to cin. It's a new operator, sorry about that. Okay, we're going to cin our number directly. And that's it, because once we put a value into our number, then it goes to the address of our number, sets that value in, and the driver sees it in the number variable. Okay, case 2. What are we going to do in case 2? Bet on odd or even. So we're going to call make a bet. And this time we're going to pass the bool be odd. Oops, capital M. All right. So let's bring that over to our function prototypes. We're going to have a void return. And again, this is not an int, this is a bool. And we're passing this one by reference. Whoops, r be odd. That looks a little strange, but that's the way it is. Okay, so now we're going to copy that over to functions.cpp. The same logic applies. The variable that we're going to use here is RBOD, or RBOD, if you want to use it phonetically. So we're going to ask the user if they want to bet on odd or even. Now you need to be careful here. You can't actually ask them to enter true or false, because that's what our bool is going to be. True for odd and false for even. You can ask them to enter odd or even, or you can ask them to enter 1 or 2 or something like that. Okay, and then we're going to return no, we're not going to return anything. We're going to set RB odd is what? That's what we're going to see in, just like we did. Well, we're not. We're going to set it equal to something. So you're going to have to put some logic in here. If you ask them if they want to bet on odd or even and they enter odd, then you can check to see if they entered odd or even. And if they entered odd, then you're going to set RB odd equals to true. If they entered even, you're going to set it equal to false. If you ask them to enter 1 or 2, you're going to have the same kind of logic. If they entered 1, this is going to be true, 2 false, or however you decide to set it up. Okay, and break. Case 3. What are we doing now? We are bet on dozens. So this time we're going to call make a bet, and when the user chooses which dozen, we're going to want the low and the high value of the dozen so that we can compare it. So we're going to pass low and high. Okay, so let's take a look at that. Okay, void return again. Low is an int. And once again, we're passing by reference. So we're going to make it R low and int R high. Okay, let's put that, whoops, missing my address of, there we go. You'll notice that's not an error because, well, C++ doesn't know what we're doing until we tell it. You know, it seems like the compiler's really smart because it finds all our errors, but it really isn't. It's really dumb. It only does exactly what we tell it to. Unfortunately, if it could read our minds, we would be way better programmers. So now we're going to ask the user which dozen they want. And what are we going to do? We're going to have to show them which dozen corresponds to what. Hold on a second. So describe the ranges of the dozens and ask which one they choose. Usually, ask to enter a number, 1, 2, or 3. So number 1 will be the range for the first dozen, which is 1 to 12. Number 2 will be the range for the second dozen, 13 to 24. And number 3 will be the range for the third dozen, 25 to 36. Then use if, else, or switch to define low and high. And it's actually not going to be low, it's going to be R low and R high. Okay, so once we set those, once again, we are done. And this is the end of part 1. I will come back with part 2 to help you finish up. These are really long. This is a long program, and I thought it was better to break it into 2 pieces. So see you in part 2.